Welcome to the DJALI'S Project Conversations, a podcast that celebrates diversity and representation in children's storytelling, entertainment, and edutainment. I am the host, Olunosen Louisa Ivaze. On this podcast, I chat with authors and creators of children's books, entertainment, and edutainment. This is also a collaboration with the Ottawa Black Book Club. So welcome Erika Joy Sneath. Welcome to the Conversations podcast of the DJALI'S project. I set up this project. The project initially was set up to educate children about the continent of Africa. And then I realized there was a huge gap in podcasts that celebrate diversity, inclusion, equity, and all of that. And I decided to open it up. So this is the first time I'm actually reading a book that touches on chronic pain. It's something I would never have thought of. So so talk to us about that. Tell us about yourself and what inspired you to write this book. I have my questions written here, so So go ahead, Erika.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And let me say thank you for the wonderful work that you're doing. It is very much needed and important and exhausting. One thing that I think we forget to name that that's a part of the journey in advocacy work in any form, is it is not only required to be in community with those doing the same, but I honestly view it as like when I'm tired, somebody else is motivated and vice versa, right? Like when I need a break, somebody else is ready to keep going. And honestly, like, I think that's okay to name that it's exhausting. It's hard to name that there's work to be done, and we're going to keep doing it. So thank you. So I'm Erika Joy Sneath. I am an educator at heart. And when I think about books, I think about the need to represent kids and humans in general. And that started when I was a classroom teacher, when my students would ask questions like, how come all these books have houses? Most of my students lived in apartments or lived with multiple family members. And representation can look like anything. I mean, somebody once asked me, do you know of any books that feature adults with tattoos? And they're just like, I don't even know if there are illustrations with, characters that have tattoos. So when we think about representation, we think about wanting to see ourselves and wanting to see our world around us. And long story short, I tripped off the curb. I broke my foot. I sprained my ankle. I did everything right. I followed all the directions. I advocated for myself, and my ankle is still not right. Basically, I have pain every single day in my ankle. I'm aware of it. I can still walk. I'm very grateful for that, but I am mindful of it hurts every day. And I have had to sort of backtrack from my own desire to be a go-getter and do lots of things and kind of slow my life down. And part of that is there are moments when I can handle more physically than others, depending on how I'm feeling and the time of the day. And it changes. So I call it kind of like the ups and downs, right? It's like some moments are better than others. And my nephews, they want to understand what that's like for me. They call me Aunt E. So they want to understand what version of Aunt E they're going to get. Are we going to play and run around? When by run around, they run around and I will play with them, but not running. Or they want to know, are we going to sit and read a book? Are we going to chat and kind of have it be chill? Is it going to be something where we can sit at the table and play a puzzle? Like all these different questions about like, okay, how are you feeling? And then what kind of Aunt E am I going to get? And I couldn't find a book out there that captured that. This sort of, okay, pain affects me, the main character, the person, but it also affects those around me, right? And so I wanted to find a story. I kept searching, chronic pain children's book or disabled children's book or disability representation, lots of different things that I was like, anything would work. But a lot of the books were focused on the character with pain or with a disability, labeling it as, grandpa has Alzheimer's or cancer or something specific, which is wonderful and definitely needed. We definitely need those stories out there to help kiddos understand the nuances of those really challenging diagnoses.
Okay.
But what happens when we don't have a diagnosis to really invite understanding, you know? And I was like, well, I'll write a story. But obviously writing the book, there's a whole lot of, you know, ups and downs in and of itself to publish, you know. But basically my motivation behind it was I can't find a book out there that I can read with them to kind of invite them into understanding this is hard for you too, and I know that. And I decided, well, I'll commit to that while also trying to represent those of us with chronic pain or illness along the way. And most people think, you know, this is Adalene Plays Many Ways is the title. And so they assume, especially given the subtitle, like managing the ups and downs of doing life with someone experiencing chronic pain, they assume that Adalene is the one with pain, which is totally understandable. And that's part of this sort of like, I don't want to say secret because I talk about it in these interviews, but it's part of the intrigue to me is Adalene isn't the one that has pain, but she is affected by her Uncle E, her Uncle Everett, that has pain, and she's affected by what version of him she gets at any given time. And I wanted to invite that sort of representation of, you know, we're inevitably doing life with our best people, right? With our community, our friends, our family, and they're impacted by what we're going through as well. And anytime I pretend that those in my life don't also do the journey with me, I do a disservice to them, because it's not as though we need to remember their perspective all the time. But when I try to pretend that like everything's great, I never need help, no one ever notices what I need, everything's perfect, I forget about those that are like watching me and they're like, wait, I could have helped, or what about this, or, you know, why do you have your cane today? These like questions of like, what does it look like for me to help you understand? I'll stop there. I could talk about it forever, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, it's you know, it just takes me back. It just takes me to a place where I have an appreciation for a lot of things we take for granted. You just take it for granted that you wake up and you go about your daily business, you come back home, have your dinner, watch TV, sleep, wake up, repeat. Yeah. And from your book where you said you worked as an educator and you didn't see stories like this, my very first proper job was as an English teacher. And what motivated me to start writing books that teach children about the continent of Africa is because I was an English teacher. I was teaching English comprehension and verbal reasoning to children. And all the books I read about indigenous populations were not written by indigenous people. And we didn't have enough African content. It was always about, we were reading about snow. I mean, we didn't have any business reading about snow.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did it. So I decided, okay, let me do that. And and this is the first book I also have read where it's mentioned that someone had to take his medication. Yeah, I didn't expect that, because when I saw Adalene Plays Many Ways, I went, okay, what's up with Adalene? So I kept going, okay, you know, I was in the playground. I thought maybe she would fall in the playground or something would happen. And then my mind went to, oh, it's actually Uncle E. Yeah, but I like the fact that he's so loving that even despite this, yes, he doesn't have the energy to run around. But he made out time to go just sit there and just his presence. Yeah, his presence. So
thank you. That almost makes me emotional hearing it, because I think like that's my desire. I often tell my sisters like the version of Aunt E that I am now is nothing compared to what I had envisioned for myself as an aunt. My sisters are my best friends. So, you know, picturing me as an aunt someday, it was like, I'm the one running around with them. I'm the one eagerly playing on the ground, like searching and, you know, acting like an animal, like all those silly things that really make a difference. And I've had to check myself with like, I can't do X, Y, or Z, but what can I do? What can I offer? What can I help them understand so that they know I love you so much? And if I was not impacted by this physically, you would see different things. but because this is my reality, here's what you can expect and here's what you can get. So thank you for sharing that. I'm like, there's something to just like, there's a lot of grace in showing up, right? And for Everett to just kind of show up and to be like, I want to go to the park with you. I don't know what it's going to look like. And part of it too is at the beginning, when I was writing it, I really wanted it to be this like juxtaposition between the two perspectives. Like Adalene's this typical young child. She's excited for the day. She's like, oh my gosh, I can't wait. When are we going? It's taking forever to get there. And Everett's like, cool, I'm excited to see her, but I'm also nervous about it. I don't know what it's going to look like for my body. I'm concerned. I really want to hang out with Adalene. And part of it too is like when they prepare for the park, Adalene and her dad walk there. They're excited. They've got their stuff. Whereas Everett, you know, we kind of hear of like he's balancing down the railing, he's taking his medication, he's grabbing his keys, he's driving there. So it doesn't totally capture all of the like nuances between the total differences of what that looks like. But what I wanted is to sort of highlight they're both on their way to the park. How they manage that and their feelings toward it are totally different, and that's okay. There's no right or wrong or good or bad. But I appreciate that you noticed like, oh, that's the first time I've heard of medication.
Yeah.
That was one of the like, when I was thinking about like, well, what do kids do to prepare for the park? You know, they're mostly excited and just waiting around for the adult, right? Like they're good. They got their shoes, like she's good from the start. And he has this like checklist of things that he needs to go through to get himself ready and make sure that he's prepared. I didn't realize how much privilege I had before I got hurt too. And they say anybody can be a part of the disabled community at any given time. So it's very humbling when you realize, that's now me. And this is now part of my journey. And I didn't talk about pain with my students when I was in the classroom. I didn't invite them into understanding, you know, Everett looks like an everyday person. He's walking. There's no physical signs that show you that something's going on until we really slow down and see him using the pillow and putting his foot up. But the days when I don't use my cane or my knee scooter or a wheelchair, when I don't have a mobility aid, I get a lot of bad looks when I use my accessible parking pass, and people look at me and they like look me up and down, and they're kind of like to the point where I'm like, I don't know if you need to see my card that proves that this is like for me, and I don't need to justify it to you, but mostly just to highlight there's this awareness piece, right? Where we forget that we don't always see what somebody is going through. I mean, there are people that have severe chronic illnesses where their body is essentially failing them, and they're showing up and they look normal and they have a smile on their face because that's what they are navigating, right? And so there's just a lot of room for interpretation and for growth as we understand, wait, maybe he does want to go to the park. He loves his niece so much. He's willing to make compromises, and it also affects Adalene along the way.
Yeah, you know, it's when you spoke about invisible disabilities, that's what I thought about. And it's also for people to understand. I was telling someone, you know, not to make insensitive statements, comments. It's, you know, people, I think one thing about us as humans, you feel because you're familiar with someone, I'm friends with Erika. Oh, Erika, you gained weight. Oh, Erika, you lost some weight. And I said, people don't need to go through their carry around a portfolio of their medical history to say, this is what I'm going through. This is why this is this. We should try to have more empathy. And sometimes it's just none of your business. It will get to that point, yes, where people just go, you know what? If you don't have anything nice to say, shh. Yeah, and let peace. So how do you think that chronic pain can affect a child's social life or self-image? Do you think it affects kids' social image? Yes, social life, but how do you think it affects?
Yeah, great question. Well, for my nephews, I think it impacts them because they automatically, because they are doing life with me, they have an understanding of, I don't always see what someone else is going through and what they're battling and what's behind the scenes. And I can learn how to understand that. So socially, I think there's some cues for them to learn. Obviously, they're 4 and 2, so they're very little. But I think in terms of them understanding how pain affects somebody else, I think they are automatically have some more cues where like, I can't say I was aware of pain, like I said, even as an adult or as a young kid, about like how we don't see what somebody is going through. I think I thought about that in terms of emotions. We don't know what somebody's day is like. We don't know what they're navigating, but not in terms of like how they're physically feeling. I never had awareness of that. And then also tons of kids have chronic pain themselves. And this is something that I didn't really have eyes to see before. I didn't have anybody that I knew in my life, in my circle. I can't think of any students that I taught that were managing chronic pain. And so, there are some kiddos that for whatever reason, either they have a medical condition or they've had an injury and it hasn't healed, but like they have pain themselves. I know kids that, have chronic migraine. And so I'm like, wait, you're a child trying to tell your family how your head hurts. And they're kind of like, yeah, have some water.
Mm-hmm.
Like we all mean well, but we're like, you're just a kid, right? Like you probably don't understand, or like, oh, your stomach's really hurting. Wait, maybe there's this issue here and you're not just anxious. So I think in terms of like social skills, I can think about a couple of kiddos that I now know that manage their own symptoms of chronic pain. And that impacts them as they think about what they do on the playground, how they interact with friends. Do they go over to somebody's house? Even just things like food. Do they have to navigate? When you think about kids with allergies too. Mm-hmm. Do they have to coordinate in advance? Do they have to make sure everything's safe? For me, accessibility is a big thing. So when I don't know what somebody's home looks like, I ask them about stairs, or I look at Google Maps and I'm like looking around to see, do they have stairs to get to their house? How many stairs is it going to be? If we're sitting around in a living room, does that take 10 stairs to get up to the living room, or is that on the main floor? So things like that I can navigate a little easier because I'm an adult, and kids have that. And socially, there's just so much pressure, right? Like there's just, as a kid, you think about just go and play and be free. And the kiddos that have chronic pain, they're never free, right? They never have that moment where it fully goes away. One thing that I've tried to share with people are like, so tell me about chronic pain. What does that mean? For me, it means I don't go 5 minutes without not feeling pain. Okay. So that means 5 minutes watching a movie. There's no 5-minute chunk where I am like, oh, I'm pain-free. I think that further invites people into understanding just how heavy it is, where it's like it never goes away. And they're like, oh, even when you're like laughing and having fun? Yep, it's still there. It's still there. Not because and people are like, are you sure? Have you tried XYZ? Not because I'm a wimp, not because I'm not trying different things to take care of it, but because it's always there. So for our kids, gosh, they just want to be free. They just want to have fun. They see other kids having fun. They just want to like be able to experience that joy. And I think they can in different ways, and they're also limited and held back, right? Like it's both.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of storytelling, how important do you think it is for children going through chronic pain to open books and see children that look like them, or no, not look like them, because most of the time it's invisible. But how important do you think it is for them to open books and read about children going through similar experiences as them? And how do you think this also affects the language in which we choose to address or talk about certain issues?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's crucial for anybody to have a book that where they see themselves and they feel heard and seen. So I think it's both. We don't just want it to be like, oh, that looks like me, or that feels like it's similar. Mm-hmm. We want it to do it justice. Like we want it to be like, oh, that means something to me, not just, oh, that looked like me, cool. But we want it to feel like there's some weight behind it, where it feels like, oh, that's really nice. And I think that's part one. And part two to me is like, why aren't there more? I don't just want this one book that features me. I want it to feel like there's other opportunities. Part of my goal, alongside so many fellow authors doing the same thing, is representation without having to call it, this is a book about representation. It's just like a natural way to invite. There's a way to see kiddos with pain. There's a way to see, somebody, again, maybe there's an adult with a tattoo, but we're not labeling, this is the book with an adult with a tattoo. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I just want it to feel like representation is out there without us having to label it as this is the book that's going to see yourself represented. But I think in terms of kiddos that have chronic pain, being like, wait, they're talking about it there. That's important. And I also want it to be more of the background thing too. So yes, we want to call it out. Yes, we want it to be represented. We also don't want it to be always, this is the book about pain, and they have that book. We want it to feel like they have this comprehensive bookshelf, and maybe it's not even a bookshelf. Maybe it's just like a bin on their floor because their home doesn't, allow them to have a bookshelf, or that's privilege in and of itself. And in terms of what it looks like moving forward, is that the second part of your question?
The language you use, you choose to, people don't, I think I try to approach a lot of things from a place of forgiveness and from a place of non-reaction, because I feel that when people sometimes are ignorant, it's my duty to educate them. Yeah. So how do you think we can use the right language? Like back in the day, rather than you say somebody is crazy, the person has mental challenges.
Right.
Oh, this person is deaf. No, the person is hearing impaired. So how do you, so that's what I was trying to say. In terms of language, how do you think we can use language or through storytelling or books like yours? How do you think this can help us build the right vocabulary? That's the word. The right vocabulary, the right vocabulary when referring to certain different conditions, respectfully.
Yeah, this is such a great question with so much to unpack, because so as an educator, I was like very trained in people first language, like someone with autism, the student who has ADHD, but a lot of it is making sure that you're actually meeting the person where they're at and being like, how do you self-identify? So a lot of people in an autistic community, they say, I want to be labeled as I'm in the autistic community. Autism is never separated from me. I never have that pulled away from me. I don't want to be the woman with autism. I'm an autistic woman. Whereas other people are like, wait, but I want to be seen as myself first ahead of the disability or whatever it is. So like I can say for myself, I don't have a particular like, oh, if somebody says like, oh, she's disabled versus like, oh, a disabled woman, or she has chronic pain, all of that is welcome to me. And just because it works for me doesn't mean that's the norm for everybody, which is challenging because it kind of means that you have to know the person and sort of kind of like pronouns. It's like, okay, how do you identify? What are your pronouns? Great, thanks for sharing. Kind of like that. It's like, how do you identify? There's this thing where we say like, they're not wheelchair bound. We want to say that they use a wheelchair. Same thing. It's like people shy away from, we want to say special needs, and it's like, just say disability, disabled. Those are not bad words, in part because they reflect somebody's experience, and special needs implies that like they don't fit the mold, that they are like special in a negative way. Okay. So in terms of language, and I actually really appreciate that you bring this up, because I chose not to have any sort of like glossary, vocabulary, how-to in my book. And I purposely wanted it to be a story, whereas some other books are a little bit more informational based. They're a little bit more how to understand, how to be mindful. I'm not opposed to that, and maybe in a future book I would do that. I wanted this first one to really be a story where if I have chronic pain, I can identify and it's on my shelves and I'm excited about it. And if I don't and I like sunflowers, hey, I'd like this book on my shelf. Or if I identify and I'm like, oh, I look like Adalene, I want that on my shelf. So part of representation for me is it serves somebody that needs to see themselves represented. And if you know nobody in your life with chronic pain, that's also a reason to get the book, to start having these conversations, to invite your youngest kiddos to start reflecting on, wait, that's interesting. I had no idea Everett needed care or had pain, or that's interesting that grandma was talking about how, you know, she misses him working in the garden and now she's being flexible, and just like, that's what representation is to me. Like, people say like, oh, but I don't know anybody in my life that's in the LGBTQIA plus community. Great, get a book, start having those conversations, welcome them in. That's the reason to kind of start that. And don't wait for like one person that has the one thing that you haven't talked about yet to then start those conversations. I just really like that. To me is like, oh, but like that's a reason to have the book. Not because I need to be this best-selling author, but because like that does a service to the kiddos that want, and adults, right? Like, this is Everett. Everett's an adult that has pain. Like, my goal was to see myself represented and support my nephews. And so a lot of adults have said, oh, I feel like you've represented me well, and now I have a tool when describing it to my friends and family and little ones. So if someone doesn't have this intimate experience with pain, and they get the book and they're talking about it, and maybe it's not their favorite story ever, that's cool. They have it on their shelves, and sometimes somebody else is like, wait, that's awesome. I connect with that because of this thing. It goes so far in terms of representing those that like are desperate to see themselves out there.
Okay, so do you think that some people are too sensitive? Because like you said, there's nothing wrong with some of those terms, because that is what it is. But do you think some people tend to be overly sensitive, or we don't have a right to say they are sensitive? Everybody has a right to feel how they want to feel, they choose to feel.
Yeah, I think sensitivity is a spectrum, and I don't know that it's my place to call somebody out on being too sensitive. Okay. I think it's mostly if somebody feels like they're sensitive to, let's say, crazy. Instead of saying crazy, I say that's wild. Like, that's wild. That, you know, and like that's an easy swap. So I don't want to be like, oh, somebody that says crazy, like you said, is purposely putting somebody down with a mental health impairment, or, you know, but there's that ignorance piece of, well, maybe they just don't know, and maybe that's a quick language swap. So yeah, I think it's the latter half of that. I don't think that we're too sensitive. I do think there's some areas for growth, certainly, and some ignorance, whether it's conscious or subconscious. And I think that when we are invited in, I mean, I'm sure you know this as a woman of color, like, you're desperate for us fellow white folks to get on board and to educate themselves, and right, to actually understand and unpack this whole white supremacy thing. I don't need to, you know, preach to you about that, but I think part of it is when you're invited in and your eyes are open to something else, that's on you then to decide, I'm going to meet them where they're at and hopefully spark some change, small or not, or hopefully try to understand. Like you said, okay, they're ignorant about this, I'm going to help them understand a little bit more. It's also that piece that I think shows us true colors, right? Like, if you're called in and you're invited in and you're met with kindness and factual information and grace and learning, and it's really this collaborative experience, and you're still unwilling, or that's the moment where you call somebody too sensitive and there's no point, that to me is, I'm like, oh, that's where I get defeated in advocacy work, because I'm like, well, we tried, and it's okay if you weren't there before and you didn't know, but now you do, and you're still unwilling, and now you're calling me sensitive for somebody else. Like, I don't think that's my place. Just like it's not my place to say, like, you're feeling your feelings too much, you're crying too much, you're smiling too much, right? Like, it's that sort of push-pull dynamic where it's like we want to meet in the middle. It's really tough. It's really hard. We want to understand what that looks like. And we have to be met in the middle, right? Like, they have to come to understand that. And that's advocacy work. That's the messy, that's what I was talking about at the beginning of, like, I'm so glad we do it in community, because when I let myself get like boggled down in but why don't they get it? Why don't they understand? I'm helping them. That I get too in the weeds with like, oh my gosh, I'm taking this so personally. And while I'm passionate about it, I don't want to take it personally. I want to call somebody in and invite them to understand, as opposed to just spewing out facts and calling out things that are unjust.
Well, I think the thing is, in my course of doing advocacy work, promoting diversity, anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I always say when I start off that I do my best to come from a place of forgiveness. A lot of forgiveness for ignorance, because sometimes people make very ignorant statements and you're like, huh? Can't believe you just said that. But like I said, I come from a place of a lot of forgiveness. And it takes me back. I used to have a colleague who would say the craziest things. Who would say these very insensitive things. And I realized that I had this other colleague from Rwanda who would never speak to her unless it was work related. And I didn't understand. And one day he said to me, Louisa, I noticed you are very, very patient. I said, yes. He said, why? I said, because you need to educate some people. Yeah, so sometimes I think people say certain things, not because they intentionally want to be mean. Yeah, sometimes they really don't know. They're just ignorant. They don't just know.
And do you think, I so appreciate that story, and I'm actually picturing myself in a staff room in the kitchen where it's sort of like, oh, okay. I really appreciate that you use that as a learning moment to be like, we have this mutual respect as colleagues and we know each other, but also we don't know each other and I need you to understand this. And like you said, kind of invited her into that. It makes me wonder, do you think, given your tolerance and your drive for forgiveness and your patience, do you wish and or hope for and or desire that more people would mimic that and be patient? I guess I'm asking because as I've done this work, I'm learning that there are some people that are more gravitated toward that and some people that I don't know that it's in the cards for them. But I don't want to use a fixed mindset and saying like, oh, they could never advocate for something. I just think like there are those of us that have like a greater tolerance to kind of listen in those conversations. Like you said, your colleague's like, I don't have the patience. In that moment, like, do you wish you could kind of call him in and be like, you do, and you can, or have you kind of seen that like, maybe that's not in the cards for him? Do you see what I'm saying?
No. And I'll tell you why I say no. One thing moving to Canada has taught me is this. You never know where a person is coming from. No. I come from a position of privilege. As a Black person, most of the time we don't use the word people of color, because they'll tell you that if you use people of color, are you trying to say white is the ultimate color? Because no human being is white. Nobody is white. Yeah.
Right.
So sometimes the way people react, I am able to be that patient because back in Nigeria, I never experienced racism. No. The only form of discrimination you experience back home is, oh, you're a poor person, you haven't got any money, or you haven't got any education, go away, which isn't so bad. But to be treated based on the color of your skin, the first time in my life I felt I was Black was when I came to Canada. And I went, oh, I'm Black? Really? So a lot of them are coming from a history of trauma. So sometimes the reason why people react the way they do is the history of where they are coming from. So that's why. So sometimes in life, I think we need to be careful. And just the way we feel, oh yes, we are doing advocacy work, we also have to have that at the back of their mind. I've spoken with someone before who said to me, I don't want to talk to you. I want to speak with someone who speaks English. And I went, but I'm speaking English. She said, yeah, well, I want to talk to someone who speaks English. American woman. And, I smiled because I went, okay, you've never left the US.
Yeah.
You've probably always lived in your small town. It's okay. I forgive you. You are just trying to tell me you want to speak with a white person. It's okay. I mean, it's a decision. It has nothing to do with me. So yeah, so it's a very thin line, and that's why I tell people that diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility is not a destination, it's a journey.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
There's a lot of unlearning that has to be done.
Tons of unlearning.
Tons of
Yes.
unlearning. And if you don't understand, it's okay. Like I tell people, it's okay for white people to ask, why is this like this? I was crossing the road the other day. This old woman saw me. Oh, I love your braids. And then she reached out and she grabbed them. Ooh. But I forgave. She's an old woman.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Doesn't know any better. And I said to her, thank you. And she went to how many hours, blah, blah. And I went on, I had a chat with her. If it was a younger person, I would have said, no, you don't. You cannot look, but you don't touch. And they, oh, okay, yeah. So I think that it depends on the individual. I am able to say this because I'm talking from a position of privilege. I have not had all of that, so I can't judge. Yeah, I don't have that power to judge.
And for him, sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, so I can't judge them. Yeah, so that's something we need to have at the back of our mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing.
People, one thing you need to realize when you do this work is, if you are able to impact 3 people, that's fine. Yes, if you have 100 people and you are able to impact 3 people, you know what? It's a small win, but it's fine. Baby steps. Yeah, but the problem with advocates is that we go in with so much passion and emotion, and we think, yeah, I'm going to change the world. Like someone said, how do you think authors, right, who write stories about understanding and navigating the ups and downs of chronic pain, how do you think they can come together to support each other in promoting their books? Because that is one challenge. Because I think your book is self-published, right?
It's published by Rebel Heart Publishing, so a small indie publisher.
Oh, so is it a traditional publisher or hybrid?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a traditional?
Traditional, yeah. Yeah, they're a smaller team, but yeah. I guess I'm kind of like directly in the middle, because I was going to self-publish and like right beforehand got invited to like basically have this scholarship through them. So it's interesting you saying, how can we come together? Because I feel like I know a lot of authors in the self-published community that are doing this work, and I feel like I'm like, yes, I'm with you. And then I'm like, oh, but I don't totally fit in that camp in these different ways. Was that kind of your question about how we can like work together?
Yeah, because I was gonna ask you, so I want to know how, because some people say it's challenging for self-published authors to come together and work together. So yeah, so I want to know from you how you think we can support each other. And then apart from that, I want you also to talk us through your publishing process, like your writing process, finding an illustrator, then finding a traditional publisher. So that would be the next step for this one. Okay.
Yeah, perfect. I think the best thing we can do is remind ourselves that it's not a competition and we all have the same goal. So when we think about authors that are out here representing in some form, my story is not competing against your story. It's not, you have 1,000, copies out in the world and I have 100 and I'm annoyed with you. I'm celebrating that. I am sharing your book. I am promoting, right? Like I use that as an example. I think there's the practical support of, I've connected with so many lovely humans through social media that when they publish a story, I'm all about it. I'm sharing to my audience. I'm doing what I can to download, to write a review. Those are like the practical how we can support. And then also just like staying updated. What are they doing in like their portion of the world, in their small town in North Carolina? Awesome. Keep up the great work. And I think the same, because I want the same too. It doesn't mean that I can shell out $10, $15, $20 every time there's a new release, but I can give my resources and my time to share to my community or write a review, like I said. And I think part of it is just remembering we're all in this team together. I think about that with every sort of author out there in general, whether it's children's books or traditional novels, is we're all out there publishing some sort of story because we believe in it and we can all do our best. It doesn't mean every book is my favorite, certainly. And then in terms of my publishing journey, you got like 3 hours? Just kidding. I like to say that writing the story was the easiest part. I wrote the story, it came out naturally, it was like no problem. By the time I decided what I was going to write about, I really like quickly knew I wanted to have 2 different juxtaposing views, Adalene and Everett's, as they prepare for the park. I wanted them to come together, we kind of see the park, and then I wanted just Adalene to pause and reflect on the day, and I wanted Adalene to talk with her grandma, in part because I knew I wanted the family journey to be different. The main characters are Adalene, her uncle Everett, Dad's a background character, and grandma. I want there to be room to kind of take those characters and mold them differently. Part of it is, you know, grandma talked about like Everett, her son, and she has another son, Adalene's dad, and they're different races. I want to talk about that sometime or not. I don't know if I want to call it out, but like there are families out there that want to see themselves without it being called out, right? And so the story itself, I was like, I got it down. I used to have this boundary where I would only work on Monday nights. Monday nights, I was like, I'm going to work on my book in some form. And then, so one Monday I wrote it, the next Monday I like edited it and then typed it up. So 2 Mondays in, and I was like, great, what do I do now? So I'm like literally Googling how to hire an editor. I'm looking at like what editors do. I know there's the actual editing in terms of like add a comma here, the like line editing. But I didn't know much about developmental editing, and I wanted an editor that I connected with. A lot of my research showed that like anybody can do the edits. You want somebody that's going to hear your story and be able to say, great, I think I have an understanding of what you're going for. I'm going to use my expertise and my insight to craft the story with you. So my editor, her name's Nicole Hall, she worked with me and she said, these are suggestions that I will invite to you to use or not. You can always disregard any of them, but a lot of them will be questions. So her questions were like, okay, so Adalene, she's about 5 or 6. Would she be using this language here? Like, do you like the language bungo jungo climber on the playground as opposed to just playground? And I was like, yes, and here's why, you know, mixing up the vocabulary. So the editing was like such a wonderful back and forth dynamic process where I felt like she was giving me her expertise. I was giving her my insight and my passion. And we were meeting in the middle, kind of taking this story and making sure it has this arc, right? This like beginning to end. And then came the really fun part of, okay, I have this book. It's edited. I have some ideas of the illustration. Now, how do I find and hire an illustrator? And I did a lot of research. I also naively thought that I would be okay with $500 in my pocket to pay for illustrations. I'm telling you, I had no idea. I was like, okay, I'll like do this book. I'll make sure it looks nice. Yeah. And then I was feeling pretty frustrated because obviously, you know, few thousand, and I knew there were some styles out there that I couldn't afford, that I would need to simplify or that I would need to say no to, but I really did not want to compromise. I didn't want it to be this book that I had out in the world and people go, oh, cool. Like I was like, I wanted people to, they don't have to think it's the best cover ever, but like I wanted them to feel like, oh, cute, that's awesome, great. And so part of it was, I was like, you know, illustrations in children's books are so important. They're crucial, absolutely crucial. And so while I like had my ideas of where I could compromise, you know, I'm talking like instead of a full spread image, I'll do half pages or things like that, but I refuse to kind of give up on my overall vision. And I'm basically, my husband's friend connected me with somebody he knew back in undergrad, and she connected me with this illustrator, and my illustrator that I finally landed on, her name's Carolee. She had never illustrated a children's book before, and when I say that, people are like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, this is her first one. And so she was kind of taking a risk with me, and I was taking a risk on her. But how I knew it was a good fit was because she initially told me, no, I don't have the bandwidth. I don't think I can do it. And then she sat on it for a while, and she came back to me and she said, Erika, can we connect on the phone this week? I really think I want to do it. I've been thinking about this book on my kids' shelves and I can't say no. I'd love to have the opportunity. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that means so much to me that you're like saying, I actually can't turn it down, and here's why. And she did so much research with me. I'm talking like margins and bleed and how do I do this part and what size would be best because of the characters and what we're looking for. And as she was crafting it, she was like, I'm already thinking about the layout. Why don't I just do the layout of the text and I'll set that all together? And like, she just went out and like crushed it. And I also had to figure out how to pay for her services, because again, my $500 was only going to get me so far. So my manager at work was like, you know what, Erika, you have such a wonderful story. I think you should just set up a GoFundMe and you should just see if people are willing to donate. If they're willing to get bought in, I think you should just kind of put it out there. That was a big moment for me, because up until that point, I hadn't shared the topic with anybody. I had shared that I'm writing this book, and I hadn't shared anything about it in terms of it's about chronic pain, it's about my own journey. And so a lot of the like GoFundMe like campaign was me kind of saying, hey, I'm Erika. I have chronic pain. I'm writing a story about chronic pain. I believe in it. Do you believe in it? Can you help me with it? You can donate $5 here or $10 there or $50 here. The response was overwhelming. I mean, so incredible. Friends of families of, oh my gosh, you're right. There's no books out there that feature that. Or yes, this would be awesome for my niece and her. Like, people were excited about the niece-uncle relationship. They were excited about chronic pain. And for me, that was just like so humbling, being like, this is my story. I'm not yet ready to share what it is, and kind of just like releasing it and having people meet me there. That was like so humbling, like a true blessing. And that's how I got my illustrations out. Like they totally paid for all of the illustrations. I was able to, and Carolee knew that. She knew that I was, raising funds, because I told her like, I refuse to let you. Basically, because this is her first children's book, she automatically was giving me a little bit of a deal, because she knew this is my first time. I'm going to be trying it out. And I said, like, I refuse to let you sell yourself short. You are an artist. This is what you do. This is a lot of time we're going to pay you because of it. And I'm going to figure out how to pay you. And so I feel like we kind of like figured that out together. And then throughout all of that, because I was talking with people about my GoFundMe, I was trying to raise awareness about this book is going to come out. Are you willing to support me now? And then I can send you a copy later. And I was having these different conversations with people, because I told myself, if I'm going to ask family and friends to donate, I need to be willing to get outside of my comfort zone and network, my favorite thing ever, and put myself out there on LinkedIn and start connecting with people in the disability space. Like, authentically, not just connecting with them because they maybe could help me with my GoFundMe, but like connecting with them because they're doing good work out there, and I believe in that too. And along the way, I met with this woman, Jennifer. She runs Lady Rebel Club, and basically their mission is like, as rebels, doing work out there to like raise awareness and support marginalized genders and those of us in the disability space. And she was elated at the idea of this book, and she was like, we have this team, Rebel Heart Publishing. I'd love to work with you in some form. We can't help you with the like GoFundMe. We can't cover the funds, but we can help you with our publishing. And she said, we can give you a scholarship. We can get your book published for you. We can get it out in the world. We can work with our networks. Once you have it all ready, let's work together. And at the time, it just felt too good to be true, because it was like, wait, you're coming in at like the last moment telling me you want to work with me. And we'd had several meetings, but a part of me was like, how can you trust me? What do you mean you believe in this? But yeah, essentially it was like, I think this is too good to be true. We'll see what happens. And long story short, it has been a labor of love. It's been wonderful in a lot of ways, and also really challenging in some ways. I was supposed to have the hardcover out by now, and it's still in process. And one thing that I'm learning is that once your book is out there, it's out there. And yes, it can take time, but it's out. And so somebody graciously reminded me, they said, Erika, it's out now. It's going to be out in the future. It's going to keep being out. It's going to keep, being available. You never know when it's going to be marketed unless it picks up and goes and takes off. Again, not because I need to suddenly quit my day job and be this like incredible author, but because I want the story to get spread wide and far so that people see themselves. So that's kind of the like some details and also the overview of, yeah, tell me about your journey. I'm like, it's been a wild, I think everybody has a wild publishing journey, but I'm like, ooh.
I have heard all kinds of stories, all kinds.
I'm sure.
When you're talking about $500 for an illustrator, I remember that last year I had planned to put out 6 children's books because I'm working on 3 different series. So the first illustrators I used were very expensive, but fantastic work. And then I found these 2 cheap guys, really, really cheap. So I went, yeah, Louisa, smart work, break it up. You can get 4 books from these guys. By December, you would have these books ready for Christmas sales. Long story short, the first illustrator sent me his work. I draw better than he does. The second illustrator stopped responding to me. And that was the end of story. So I just said, you pay for quality work, you get quality. So does, what's her name, Carolee? So now does she do children's illustration now?
I bet you she's going to. I haven't asked her if she's taken on any more like author projects. I should say children's books, but it's funny because she's always been a designer. She's always been an illustrator. But mostly designing, you know, campaigns or like something for a brand or something. And it was interesting. Like the reason why I went with her is because she like did a little mock-up of Adalene and Everett sitting on the bench. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. Like, I was like, you got it. You got the vision. And she was very open to working with me, a new author, and like us figuring it out together. Because part of it is I wanted somebody to lead with their expertise. You know, I'm not an artist. Like I can't understand that vision, but I also didn't want someone to get offended with my ideas. So an example of that is like originally she had Adalene wearing a purple shirt. And I told her like, I'm not feeling purple. Actually, I love yellow. I think Adalene's all about like bright and kid-like and fun and, you know, lighthearted. And she was like, got it, perfect. And one of my priorities was like, hey, grandma's not wearing a dress. We don't want her being the classic grandma. She doesn't have like the classic grandma haircut. I don't want her to be like the like apron wearing in the kitchen, doing the grandma thing that most people are used to. And she was like, great, got it. And then she'd also like invite my perspective about these different type of shoes. An example of her sort of spin on it was she kept saying like, you know, Dad's a secondary character. He's in the background, he's there, but he needs to have more muted tones for his outfit. So you're not supposed to notice his outfit and how like, oh great, like I think he's wearing like blue jeans and a blue top or something. Like it's like basic, right? And that's because we don't want to see it in comparison to some of the other ones. So anyway, she was very flexible and open to kind of crafting that with me. And we had a lot of fun kind of the back and forth and tell me about this thing and what's your spin?
Yeah, that's quite interesting because, you know, when you spoke about her yellow top and you didn't want grandma, it reminds me of my book. So in my book, my main character is actually wearing a yellow jumpsuit. Yeah, because
I love that.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, what color, you know, she's a child, she's a kid. Yeah. What color? So there she is in her yellow jumpsuit. Yes. And then he was asking.
Love it.
Yeah, so he was asking about her mom. What about the mom? I said, ooh, I want the mom to be in jeans. So that's her there in the hair salon, and that's her in jeans, and then that's her hair all out, you know, fixing her hair. Yeah. Okay. So please, I would like you to read the book to me, to us, because I always say, that authors of books are the best people who have the right voices to read their stories. So well, while you read,
thank you.
Yeah, I'll show the viewers the pages as you read.
Perfect. When I'm at events, I like to kind of start in the middle. I'll start where Adalene is on the playground. She's jumping around on this page, and Everett's kind of peeking at the top.
Okay.
Perfect. It is right after this one where she's on the bridge.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Adalene hopped through the barrier, bounced on the bungle jungle climber, skipped to the top step, and looked back. Why wasn't Everett trying to catch up to her? Everett was still standing at the top. He called out to Adalene that he needed a break. Adalene hesitated for a moment, then slowly started dragging her feet as she went back to meet him at the picnic table. Hey, Adalene, thanks for coming over. I'm pretty disappointed that I'll need to stop and rest for a bit. Oh, that's okay. Here's a juice box. Everett enjoyed the calm moment to sip his juice. Adalene slurped hers quickly to get back to playing. Okay, are you ready? Let's go, Adalene announced. Not yet, but I can rest here while you play on the monkey bars. Why don't you hand me that pillow on your way? Sure, E. Let me get this set up for you. Everett watched Adalene swing from one rung to the next. He wished he could have played more, but he knew it was time to head home. He promised to see Addie later that week. Everett spent the rest of his day resting on the couch while Adalene continued playing. Why didn't Uncle E want to stay longer? She wondered to herself. That night, when Grandma tucked Adalene in, she sensed something was bothering her, Addie. Sweetie, what are you feeling tonight? Grandma asked with care. Well, Grandma, I want to tell you something, but I don't want you to be mad. Anytime you're open to sharing your feelings, I'd love to listen, Grandma replied. Does Uncle Everett like playing with me? Last weekend he was building blocks and we were just laughing and having fun. Today he didn't want to play. I'm confused by that, and it makes me sad. Thank you for sharing with me. I hear where you're coming from. It must have been really disappointing when he wasn't able to play. Yeah, Adalene replied. That makes sense. I'm curious. Did it seem like he was having fun? Maybe a little bit? It was hard to tell. I really wanted him to play tag with me. I'm wondering if Everett was in more pain this morning at the park, Grandma shared. I bet he really wanted to play, but decided not to. Sometimes a lot of playing makes him too tired for everything else in the day. How can you tell? He was smiling and so excited to see me at the park, Grandma, Adalene wondered. Honestly, sweet Addie, you usually can't tell. There are many people who suffer from chronic pain or illnesses that, according to most, look normal. I know for a fact that Everett absolutely loves being your uncle. If he had it his way, he would have played tag all day. Grandma continued, It's okay for you to be disappointed. I'm sad too. I used to love it when Everett helped me in my garden. I think about him when I tend to my plants, and I also bring over fresh flowers for his table when I visit. When we play cards, we have something pretty to look at. He also offers ideas of what I should plant next and helps me research what steps I need to take for that process. Thinking of a different activity to do together is one way to demonstrate your care and understanding of his pain. Is there another activity you could do with him another day? Maybe I'll ask him to read a couple books with me, Adalene suggested. That sounds really nice, Addie. Now sleep tight. The next morning, Adalene called her Uncle Everett. Uncle E, would it be okay with you if I came over? I'd love to read with you. I would absolutely love that, Adalene. I'll see you soon. The end.
Thank you so much. What would you like to see for your books? What future would you like for your books? What would you like to see for your books?
I would love to continue writing stories that are stories, so not like how-to or informational. I'd love to write more stories that ideally follow Adalene, but I also have some ideas for some new characters. And representation in lots of different forms, either for myself or small things like the tattoo thing I think about all the time, or just different things about how to invite representation without having to call it that. That's my big thing.
Okay. And if people want to buy your books, where can they find your books to buy?
Yeah, right now it's available on Amazon, and you can also find different links available if you want the ebook or paperback version on my website, erikajoysneath.com.
Okay. And what's your Instagram handle for people who want to follow you?
Same thing, Erika Joy Sneath.
Okay. And are you also on Facebook?
I am, yes. It's Erika Joy Sneath, author, or maybe dash author. I always get that mixed up. I'm not on there as much.
Okay, so I just want to say a very
Perfect.
It's been great, I mean, yeah, it's been a journey going back and forth. So,
yeah.
but all the same, I want to say a very, very big thank you. I wish you all the
best. Thank you, Louisa. It was great to connect with you. I'm sure we could have chatted for hours. Thanks for spending your Saturday with me.
I wish
we'll be in touch.
Yeah, I wish you all the best with your writing.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Enjoy your weekend. Bye.